As a warning, this episode includes descriptions of violent acts and choice language that may be triggering to some audiences. Please be advised.
Ask any American when schools first desegregated, and there's a pretty good chance they'll say the 1960s. Or they'll cite the United States Supreme Court's 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education decision. But actually, the first court-ordered school integration occurred nearly a century earlier in Muscatine, Iowa. In 1868, the Iowa Supreme Court ruled that the local school district had to allow 12-year-old Susan Clark to attend the previously all-white elementary school. The court wrote, "The board cannot, in their discretion or otherwise, deny a youth admission to any particular school because of his or her nationality, religion, color, clothing, or the like." It was a groundbreaking decision that you've almost certainly never heard of. There are probably a lot of moments like this that are lost to history, either because no one was there to document it, or it was eclipsed by other events like natural disasters, world wars, or things happening in places that are just bigger and demand more attention. So if you've never heard of the Clinton 12, you are definitely not alone.
Yeah, so I'm Adam Velk, V as in Victor, ELK, and I'm the director here at the Green McAdoo Cultural Center.
Velk is a historian who specializes in the civil rights movement.
So I'm originally from Chicago, and it was like this story, like I just didn't even know that it existed.
Velk is now the director at the Green McAdoo Cultural Center, a museum dedicated to telling the story of the Clinton 12. So, as he was prepping for his job interview, he did what historians do. He dug into archives, and he read a lot.
And I was shocked, but also upset, because I couldn't believe that this story got overlooked in history books. Because all I could think of was like, this has everything. Like this has everything you want in a history narrative. Why did I never hear about this story?
This is a Tennessee Civil Rights Trail podcast, a series where historians and experts help us explore some of the most significant events of the movement in the state. You'll also hear the real stories of the people who were there and who made a difference, and why what took place in Tennessee then is still so relevant today. By many accounts, Clinton, Tennessee was a pretty nice place to live in the 1950s. The town was overwhelmingly white, and like most of the South, it was segregated. But according to Joanne Allen Boyce, who was born there, and Bobby Cain, who moved there as a second grader, it wasn't quite as bad as many other places.
Growing up in Clinton, we were able to, believe it or not, go down to the White Recreation Center and play inside the school with some of those fellows and shoot basketball, go out there on the football field, play sandlot football.
Boyce had even more opportunities. Her mother had left school at 16 to work for a prominent white family in town.
She helped to raise their 4 children. She cooked the food. She cleaned their house. She would often take me to work with her, which was fantastic to me because they had a library and I loved to read. And so I would go and I would sit in their library and I would read all day.
Boyce said it was no secret that there were places they couldn't go, things they couldn't say, and lines they couldn't cross. This was especially true for her father, who was darker skinned. But her mother could pass. Boyce's great-grandfather was white, a Confederate soldier. And even as a child, Boyce knew her mother would occasionally cross the line.
My mother was very, very fair, and she would go to a hat shop and try on hats that she wasn't supposed to because she could get away with it.
I actually came across an article in the New York Times that was written back then.
Again, Adam Velk, director of the Green McAdoo Cultural Center.
And it took place in my mother's hometown, where they were comparing Clinton, Tennessee to Deerfield, Illinois. And they said, for the people in southern towns like Clinton, they have no problem living next to people of color as long as they don't rise above their socioeconomic standing, as long as they don't rise above their current standing. Whereas people in Deerfield and other northern towns don't care if Black people rise above their social standing as long as they don't live next to them.
But after the end of World War II, African American soldiers started returning home and demanding more, including better schools. In Clinton, Black children attended Green McAdoo Grammar School through 8th grade. It was a hollow comparison to the school white children attended. For a long time, there was no gymnasium, no cafeteria, and no indoor restrooms. The textbooks, clearly marked obsolete, were old hand-me-downs from the white elementary school. By the time Bobby Cain started at McAdoo as a second grader in the late 1940s, they'd added a cafeteria, but there were still just 2 classrooms. One teacher taught the lower grades, and the other teacher taught the upper grades.
Once you graduate to a grade, you may move a seat or not move a seat.
There was no high school for Black students in Clinton, so students had to travel more than 40 miles round trip to Knoxville to attend school.
I did that for 2 years. My last year of middle school education and then my first year of high school. It was harsh. It was harsh to have to get up early in the morning, to walk past the high school that was there, but not for us, to go in front of a drugstore, to wait for the bus, to get on the bus, to maybe make it to school. And, during the winter, it was really bad because of snow and ice. And many days we would slide off the road and have to turn around and come back home. During the summer, it was unbearably hot. So it was not a pleasant ride. And I did that for 2 years.
Bobby Cain rode the bus back and forth to Knoxville for several years. He was a multi-sport athlete in junior high.
Well, I played shortstop, third base. I'm not bragging on myself. I was pretty good. I was a good hitter and everything, and I was a good basketball player.
But once he got to high school, it was just too hard to keep up that schedule. By the time he went to practice and caught the bus back to Clinton, it was really late at night. And not only that, families also had to pay for their children to attend the out-of-county public high school.
So for me, it was not that bad because I was the only child. But for one family with 12 kids and, 11 kids and 9 kids, that was extremely difficult. And even though their kids would not always go at the same time, they would usually have 2 or 3 going around the same time. And, people in our community were poor. We didn't have any rich people in our community. Some were better off than others, but mostly we were poor.
In August 1950, 4 Black youth attempted to enroll at the all-white Clinton High School, but they were rejected. Their parents sued in federal court and were represented by a prominent group of African American activist attorneys. This included Z. Alexander Luby, who was famous for defending the Nashville student sit-in participants. Another attorney in that group was Thurgood Marshall, who at the time was with the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund.
The NAACP kind of took a bit of a shotgun approach to these court cases where they tried so many different ways of challenging it. And interestingly enough, for Clinton, one of the challenges that they argued was that the Black school in Knoxville, Austin High School, which is now Austin East, was actually better than the school in Clinton. And so their argument was that separate but equal couldn't be upheld because the white students in Clinton, they didn't have as many classes, they didn't have as many, this and that.
The year is 1952, and a federal judge rules against the plaintiffs in the Clinton school lawsuit. 2 years later, as the appeal is working its way through the legal system, the U.S. Supreme Court rules in Brown v. Board of Education that segregation is inherently unequal. This strikes down the separate but equal doctrine nationally. And in Tennessee, it sets off a flurry of legal action in the Clinton lawsuit. 2.5 weeks after Brown v. Board, the Court of Appeals reverses its earlier ruling in the Clinton case. This sends it back to the district court. Sensing the inevitability, Clinton city officials scramble to upgrade black schools in hopes of possibly delaying desegregation. But they also appoint a committee to plan for integration. Then, in January of 1956, 4 years after the black families in Clinton filed their lawsuit, the federal judge who originally ruled against them reverses course. He orders the school board to end segregation by the fall. And for a moment, it looks like the town of Clinton, Tennessee might do so, peacefully. Taking a pause here to say that if you want to learn more about visiting important civil rights sites throughout Tennessee, from Memphis to Nashville to Clinton, go to tncivilrightstrail.com. They're a part of the full United States Civil Rights Trail, found at thecivilrightstrail.com. Okay, back to the story.
As a warning, this episode includes descriptions of violent acts and choice language that may be triggering to some audiences. Please be advised.
It's August of 1956, and 12 African-American teenagers in Clinton are preparing to be the first students to desegregate a state-supported high school, not just in Tennessee, but in any southern state.
I had no choice but to go to Clinton High School once they stopped going to Knoxville. So my parents did not discuss it. My parents didn't have any meetings with me, and nor anyone else in the community. No, it was just carte blanche. I went down there. That was it.
On Monday, August 20th, Bobby Cain, Joanne Boyce, and 10 other black students register for school without incident. However, by that weekend, outside agitators show up. On Sunday, John Casper arrives in Clinton. He's a Columbia University-educated member of the Ku Klux Klan and a militant segregationist.
John Casper gets into town, and he spends most of the day knocking on doors, rabble-rousing. So he's holding pictures of a black sailor kissing a white girl, and he's knocking on doors and he's saying, look at, this is what's happening. You need to start freaking out because we're going to have a society that's going to be in complete ruins by the end of the week because we're allowing black people to go to white schools.
It's against this backdrop that on Monday morning, 12 teenagers gather at the top of Foley Hill. In the shadow of the Green McAdoo Primary School, they form a circle and pray that they'll have a good day and won't be harmed. As one of the 2 seniors and a star athlete, Bobby Cain is a leader by default.
I had no thought about it because we didn't have any racial problems as far as I realized there in Clinton. I know where I could go in and go out and all of that. But as far as going to the high school, I didn't know if there was going to be any problem down there. Thought nothing about it.
Joanne Boyce is a junior. She's got a new hairstyle where she cut new bangs for herself. And she's not quite sure what to think of them. She's dressed in a beautiful black top and matching skirt that her grandmother handmade for the occasion.
We were, I don't want to say fearful, but maybe we were like on pins and needles. How are we going to be accepted when we walk down the hill? How are we going to be accepted when we go inside the school? The pledge we made is that we're going to walk down the hill, we're going to hold our heads up high, and we are going to show bravery. And that is exactly what we did. It wasn't bad. It was a few people hanging out and looking at us.
There's anywhere from about 10 to 15 protesters Most of them are actually dopey kids. Like, they're dopey teenagers. There's a famous photo that comes around on social media now. There's a kid wearing like a tank top, and he's holding a sign that says, like, isn't even spelled right, and it's saying, you know, we don't want any N-words in our school.
Inside the school, a white girl nominates Joanne Boyce to be vice president of their homeroom.
I'm not saying this to say this is all true, but she said Joanne is so pretty and so smart that they recognize that, you know, she could be the vice president.
Bobby Cain experiences a little more tension while in the auditorium, but it's nothing he can't handle.
This white boy turned around and started staring me in the face, and I wasn't going to back down. I stared him in the face. We had a stare-down contest. I wasn't going to drop my eyes. He wasn't either.
The conditions deteriorate as the week progresses. John Casper has been making more and more noise, attracting segregationists from across the South and beyond. By Tuesday, those dozen or so teenage protesters swells into a churning gauntlet of adult men and women, yelling slurs at the kids as they walk down the hill. The mob throws rocks, eggs, and rotten tomatoes. Once inside, Joanne Boyce opens her locker to find that her books have been torn. And there's a note that says, "Go home."
We were noticing more taunting conversations walking behind us, people who were saying unkind things about us. They began to get really close up on our heels, and they would step on our heels, and we would get notes in our lockers. And then by the end of the week, we were starting to get tacks in our seats. You had to be really careful, because if you didn't know they were there, you weren't paying any attention, you'd sit on one.
Well, you hear different people talk about it, but as far as my thoughts about it, it was a hellacious situation. It was a bunch of people out there hollering and jeering and cursing going on. And once we walked down that hill, now I'm going through this crowd down here, and these people cursing and whatever. It was a frightening experience for me. I didn't tell anyone that.
By the end of the week, the African-American parents are driving their kids down the hill to school. And at least one of the Clinton 12 is sick and misses classes. John Casper has been arrested for inciting a mob. So on Friday, Asa Carter shows up. Carter is an avowed segregationist and speechwriter. He co-wrote Alabama Governor George Wallace's famous inaugural speech that said, "Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." He's in Clinton as a founder and leader of the new Klan splinter group. It's known as the original Ku Klux Klan of the Confederacy. And he's brought people with him. By Saturday, more than 3,000 segregationists converge on Clinton, and there's real violence happening. Most of it is targeted directly at the Black community up on Foley Hill.
There were threats of bombing the mayor's house and bombing the news headquarters. Meanwhile, there were bombs going off up here on Foley Hill. They were lighting dynamite off in these students' yards. There was a place here called the Chicken Shack, which was right around the corner from the Green McAdoo. That got bombed out completely.
We had an incident where my best friend, Gail Ann, who was one of the students, boyfriend came to see her. He was in full Navy regalia, full, and he was attacked by the mob. Fortunately, the Tennessee Highway Patrol, they protected him and got him out of harm's way. But if you can be in the uniform of one of the nation's armed services and still be attacked, that's scary.
Local law enforcement is too small to handle that kind of mob, so they start deputizing a volunteer citizen police unit.
Where they start knocking on people's doors and saying, grab your gun, you're a deputy now. I don't care that you were an accountant an hour ago, you're a deputy now. And so about 100 or so, Clintonians are now deputized. And they're told, whatever you do, never turn your back to the mob and never run away. Back away slowly. There's your training. Go for it.
Some of the volunteers head up Foley Hill with their guns to help protect the residents. Other volunteers use tear gas bombs to disperse the large crowd gathered on the courthouse lawn downtown.
This is an incredible moment that, this town stands up against the rioters, but I do really want to point out that, a lot of these Home Guard people, or at least some of these Home Guard members who couldn't have cared less about this being an issue over desegregation. It was who's going to run this town, the law or these protesters? Who are we going to allow to call the shots here, us or them?
A few weeks later, a national publication runs an article about Bobby Cain.
And you read this devastating account of what's going on with him. It talks about how he goes home after school and he lays in bed and he hangs out in the fetal position because of all the trauma he's dealing with. And he stays there. He stays there for the rest of the night and then, maybe gets up and eats dinner, but is dealing with this insane trauma, knowing the Klan is riding in the neighborhood that night, that parents here on the Hill are taking shifts with shotguns to protect, these people and these kids.
It isn't just parents taking up shifts on the Hill. Bobby Cain is out there too.
And I tell everyone the most beautiful sight in my life there at Clinton High during that time is we were lying out there in the field and looking over into South Clinton, because we could see South Clinton from where up there on the hill. And while we was out there, it was on a Saturday night, and they were hooping and hollering. You could hear them downtown. And all of a sudden, coming around that bend over there in South Clinton was a red light, another red light. It looked like, next thing I know, like hundreds of them coming. And that was one of the most beautiful sights that I remember today, because I said, oh, okay, we got some security maybe coming in.
What most in Clinton don't know is this. Long before John Casper and Asa Clark arrived in town, the Tennessee National Guard had been preparing for a potential riot. Those red lights Bobby sees, that is the National Guard. On Saturday of Labor Day weekend, Tennessee Governor Frank Clement sent the order.
I do want to point out that not only did he do that, but he had to eat a big piece of humble pie. There was nothing he wanted to do less than send in the National Guard.
Velk says the governor agreed to send in a National Guard only if the police chief, the sheriff, and the mayor sent him written letters saying they desperately needed the help. They stepped away from their duties, typed the letters, and sent them to the governor, who then activated the Highway Patrol and the National Guard. With the violence quelled and the outside agitators expelled, the rest of the fall semester went okay for the Clinton 12. The white students who'd been friendly the first few days of school stopped smiling and started avoiding eye contact. Those were quiet aggressions. Others were louder.
So a bunch of white boys came into the cafeteria and they said they were going to beat me up. And I asked them, so why is it that every time I'm involved with you, it's always a gang? I said, why can it not be just one-on-one? So the lights went out. And so I heard someone holler out, oh! So they turned the lights back on. They had hit my classmate. He had stepped in front of me, so he took the blow. And what happened was I wasn't thinking. The lights went out again, and they fired my head up.
The intimidation continued. By November, one of the Clinton 12 girls had moved to Florida to attend a black high school. Several others stopped attending school altogether. Or they were regularly missing classes because, as Joanne Boyce says, it just felt too dangerous. In early December, a local white minister named Paul Turner stepped forward. He hadn't participated in any marches or armed himself to defend the families on Foley Hill, but he had preached from the pulpit about peaceful integration. And now he was making an offer. He would escort the 10 students who remained in Clinton to and from school each day to make sure they were safe.
6 of the parents agree, and so that first day, he walks them down the hill, and they get to school safely. After the students get into school, Reverend Turner is jumped by 5 members of the White Citizens Council, and he takes a beating. There's blood all over 2 cars. He gets his nose busted up, massive black eye.
That day also happened to be an election day for the Clinton mayor and several other positions. The White Citizens Council was running candidates in pretty much every race on a white supremacist platform.
And Reverend Turner, his wife says, he would have forced us to bring him to the voting booth on a stretcher. He was going to vote. But this moment really becomes a big rallying moment, because up until this point, everybody's kind of wavering. They're being very apathetic. But when a reverend gets beat up in your town, it was kind of a wake-up call.
Not only does it get a lot of national news attention, but on Sunday, Reverend Turner, still looking beaten and bruised, gave a sermon that was broadcast on CBS.
He says, there is no color line at the cross. These kids have a moral right to attend this school. And it was such a wild moment because no one was talking about moral rights. No one was brave enough to say, this is the right thing to do. I believe this is the right thing. They always said it's the law of the land, but he says this is a moral right that these kids have to go to school, go to this school. And it really just energizes, I'd say, the national consciousness of what is going on. It was one of those kind of seminal moments where it's unfortunate that it took a white guy getting beat up for people to care about civil rights for, black children, but it was something that woke people up.
Later that month, Joanne Boyce and her family moved to California, where they had relatives. They thought that if a group of white men would do that to a white minister, what would they do to some black kids if they wanted to hurt them? Over the next several months, the Clinton 12 continued to dwindle. Bobby Cain graduated on May 17, 1957, 3 years to the day after the Brown versus Board decision. He became the first African-American graduate of a white public high school in the South during the era of Jim Crow. The other senior in the class, Alfred Williams, was suspended weeks before what would have been his graduation. He had used a knife to defend his younger brother, also a Clinton 12 member, from a group of white students trying to beat him up. In May of 1958, Joanne Boyce's best friend, Gail Ann Epps, graduated, making her the first African-American woman to graduate from an integrated public high school in Tennessee. Later that fall, Clinton High School, a school that had already been through so much, was attacked one last time. 3 immense explosions destroyed the building. The bombers were never identified.
Margaret Anderson, who was a teacher at Clinton, and she wrote this book called Children of the South about Clinton in the 5 years after. And she said, we sent children to do the work of men. We sent children to do the work of adults. And, that always just sticks with me, that they went in there quietly. They just wanted to go to school and get their work done. But they were forced because the court said, you got to go.
Bobby Cain describes what it was like for him.
HELL, because no one talked to me that whole year. It was worth it in this term. My parents did not have any money to send me to school. I received some money from the Pittsburgh Courier paper, the Elks Lodge.
He used that money to attend Tennessee State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in social work. He worked for a time at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. He served 21 years in the Army National Guard, and then went to work as a supervisor with the Tennessee Department of Human Services. After moving to California to complete high school and college, Joanne Boyce worked for decades as a nurse. Later in life, she had a regular gig as a jazz singer at the iconic Roosevelt Hotel, located on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in the heart of Los Angeles.
I never wanted to leave. I never wanted to leave. In fact, I'm 80 years old now and still feel guilty. And to this day, it still pains me. Although, in retrospect, it was a good move.
After listening to the podcast, you can learn more about the Clinton 12 by visiting the town's Green McAdoo Cultural Center. Just go to tncivilrightstrail.com to begin planning your trip. In this episode, we heard from the director for the Green McAdoo Cultural Center, Adam Velk, and from Bobby Cain and Joanne Boyce, two of the Clinton 12. I'm Marlene Gordon. The Tennessee Civil Rights Trail podcast is sponsored by the Tennessee Department of Tourist Development. The series was produced by Ingredient Creative with Tanner Latham as executive producer and Tanya Ott as the writer. Elliot Majerzik edited and mixed the sound, and research was provided by Archival Ninjas.